Welcome to the Franchise Freedom Podcast, where you can escape the corporate trap through franchise ownership.
Franchisors as well as franchisees. And every organization is different. Yeah, depending if the franchisor offers what they call turnkey marketing. Some are going to be a little bit less, and not because they don't want to assist their franchisees, but maybe it's more B2B and they have you going out and doing more of the networking in the chamber. But we see a lot in the home services space, which you have a lot of experience in, helping those brands. So the question that comes up is that there's a different strategy at the franchisor level. There's typically a brand fund. You're getting kind of that national presence across the country. And then you have the franchisees located in their specific markets, maybe a couple zip codes or a handful of zip codes in their states. So the question is, the strategies are different, but at the same time, how do they work? How do you kind of work together so that you're not replicating posts and content and potentially, I would assume, maybe get penalized for that? So how does that strategy kind of differ when you're putting money into the brand fund, but you're also doing kind of marketing at the local level where, the information for the most part is similar because you're all dealing with the same brand?
Yeah, I run this a lot. Every brand I've worked with has a different version of what you just said. It's amazing. Everybody has opinions.
Right.
Other agencies have opinions from experience, some from lack of experience will recommend things. So there's all this noise of information and recommendations out there. So I understand why there's this big variety of what I inherit when I work with the brand, or even I just analyze brands a lot. I have, hey, Lonnie, can you look at my website and tell me what you think? And I'll get on calls with them. I'll give them my advice, and get off that call. But it's amazing the differences in what I see. And again, a lot of my recommendations are in my masterclass. I know that sounds like I'm promoting it, but these are all the kind of questions I get is generally what you just asked. And so I can't stress enough that I've covered all this stuff in there. And for people who are listening to this and that have their own concerns and questions to go, I get them asked. But anyway, so what I see commonly is the brand will take money out of the brand fund, use it for lots of things. But if they end up doing SEO or using some of it for SEO, there is a national SEO strategy, right? And so when Google is looking at a franchise brand's website, they don't sit there and go, oh, that's a franchise. It's not how they analyze things. They analyze things that it's just another website. And so when they see that website, they have the same expectations as they would see on your website or a franchisee's website if they have a different website. Is they want to see content about the subject matter that they're in. So it doesn't matter what industry you're in. There's an expectation that you're going to be talking about, med spa information or roofing information or medical information about whatever you do or whatever you sell or whatever you offer. And you kind of want to be informative. You want to display the fact that you are an expert. So you have all this wealth of information that anybody in the general public can turn to learn something like it's a resource. So that's one thing at the national level your brand should be doing. Some of them do, some of them don't. Some of them do it well, some of them don't, right? So there's just lots of variety of what that is. And I could talk about that for an hour all by itself. But when you're a franchisee, if your brand is doing it right, then you don't need to establish yourself as the expert in roofing. You don't establish yourself as the expert in facials or waxing or, men's health, whatever it may be. You just need to establish the fact that you are operating in your city. Okay. So when your franchise brand gives you a microsite of some sort, which is hopefully tied to the brand itself. Now you're being evaluated because you're connected to that brand. You don't need to rewrite a blog about roofing. You don't need to rewrite a blog about medical stuff. You don't need to establish yourself as an expert in the niche or the industry you're in, because that's already been done website brand level if the brand's doing it. So
Right.
You're really just trying to establish yourself with local relevance that you are in that geographic market. So that's where there's really not a lot you can do above and beyond what's usually recommended. Is if you have any ability to optimize your website yourself, or you can, your franchise brand works with an agency that can do it for you. What you're really doing is most brands, every website is exactly the same for the franchisees, a microsite. So you have a very similar structure, right? The only difference would be this one's going to talk about Scottsdale. This one's going to talk about Los Angeles. This one's going to talk about Denver. This one's talking about Miami. But usually the rest of the content about the industry they're in is the same. Now, when I take on a franchisee and we do local SEO for them, one of the first things we do is, in theory, we were getting, the brands we work with, I only work with them if I can actually optimize that page. Some brands don't allow that. They're like, no, this is a template. We're not touching it. Well,
Oh,
I'm gonna
really?
say,
Wow. Huh.
you're severely limiting my ability to improve that franchisee's market. But they're like, in their mind, it's scale and it's the management of hundreds of locations that will have different content, whatever it may be, reasons why they make that decision. I don't think they understand the impact it has by being able to optimize locally. So we'll go to that page and we'll really hone in and get hyper local and add a bunch more words about the points of interest in Scottsdale. Talk about the things that only people in Scottsdale would recognize. And it's not even related to the industry you're in. But what I'm trying to establish in Google's mind is that we are operating there. And I know that sounds like it's an obvious thing. You said Scottsdale on your page already. What else do you need to do, Lonnie? There's 30 Springfields in the US.
Right.
There's 80 some odd Washingtons, right? I mean, or what related to Washington. So Google is a robot again. And yeah, you might give enough information that makes it obvious to you that you're operating in that city, but Google's robot wants to see more depth. I mean, there's Pasadena, Texas, there's Pasadena, California. And so if you don't really highlight more specific hyperlocal information that differentiates the two Pasadenas, and yeah, you can put California and Texas, and that seems like an obvious thing, but I'm telling you from experience, it takes more.
Right.
And the more depth we go with localizing that content, the more Google trusts which city you're in, and then we'll rank you higher because of that. So that's one of the things that we do for our clients. But if you're a franchisee and you can edit your own content, find a way to crowbar that in there, add your own influence. And so that's what you can do to the website. And then when it comes to your Google business profile, which is, more important in my opinion than the website itself.
Yeah.
Okay. That's where you want to do the same thing. You want to make it hyper local. You want to add photos and I was just at a franchisee's grand opening when I was in Scottsdale, actually. And this is another thing I didn't even put on LinkedIn. So I'm actually going to do that today, but so it's cool to go see franchisees in person, right? You can boots on the ground, you can meet the people, you can, really put that perspective out there. So I really enjoyed myself out there, but I sat there and I told the owner, I said, okay, drive all around Scottsdale, taking pictures of points of interest, the Scottsdale sign, the things that are recognizable, put your wrapped vehicle out in front of it and, make a comment about it. But what you're effectively doing in Google's eyes is you're confirming to them that you are operating there. That's your territory. That's your service area. It's not enough just to say Scottsdale on your website, Scottsdale inside your Google business profile. They want to see that depth. And that depth is often very hard for a brand or an agency to produce. So if I'm a franchisee and I'm trying to do the things that are going to bring the most value to me as a franchisee, again, hoping the brand is doing the right things, then when you come in and do the things I just mentioned, that's going to be a game changer for you. So that's what I would recommend. That's going to keep things, keep the conflicts down when it comes to, again, if you write about roofing, and your franchise, a lot of brands will give their franchisees local blogs, and I see them write about roofing, about med spa. All you do is hurt the brand because the brand already has content about that stuff. So when you write about it, Google looks at they're just 2 pages on the same website. And if they're they're talking about both about roofing or both about, I don't know, skincare, whatever it may be, then Google doesn't know which page should be the premier page. So it actually brings down the national page, which reduces the effectiveness of it because there's lack of traffic. Your page goes up a little bit, but your page will never go to number 1 locally.
Right.
So you have to be very selective with the content you generate at a franchisee level on the website to things that are just hyper local, that are unique to that location. If it can be answered on a national post that's generic, it doesn't mean you need a local version of that because people aren't going to Google and searching for how do I fix a roof leak? And then in Houston,
Right.
What's the difference between Houston or whatever, right? So like the people write, I see those blogs everywhere, and I'm like, you just wasted your money and energy, and you actually hurt the brand probably. Anyway, I can give you 10 examples of this where I went to the brand and go, look, I'm gonna go delete all this stuff. I don't care how much your franchisee spent on this. They're actually hurting us, the system as a whole. And that's a whole battle by itself. But anyway,
I can't even imagine. You got all these other business owners, and and they may not really, they're not doing it intentionally, right? They
have good intentions. It's a good thought process, but no one's telling them otherwise. Everybody's moving 100 miles an hour in the agency. But you got to put these in the brand policy. So I'll work with brands and say, hey, here are the rules that you need to put out there. I need to tell you why. And then they put them out there. Within the franchisees are like, oh, my nephew, who's an SEO guy, says I need a blog and do all these things. Like the intention's right, but that person doesn't have the experience to know what they're actually asking for and what the impact is negatively when you're working in a franchise system. So that's where it ends up becoming a battle, and it shouldn't, but it just does. And so brands want to be helpful. They want to be collaborative. So a lot of times they say yes, and then because they don't know either. And I come in and go, we're going to go delete all this. And they just look at me in horror. And I go, or we don't. Then I'm going to go work with somebody else because I'm not going to be able to do my job,
Getting your local SEO right is a game changer. Can Lonnie share a real-world example of how these strategies dramatically transformed a franchise system's lead generation, even after years of mediocre results with a major agency?
Thanks for tuning in. If you want to learn how to make the transition from corporate to owning your franchise, join Giuseppe on the next episode. You can also follow on all social media platforms and achieve financial and time freedom today.